Welcome and good morning, good afternoon, or good evening to you. It's great to have you on this webinar today. My name is Rogan Morrison. I'm a Vocus Labs Delivery Director here in EMEA, and it's great to have you on this session where we're going to look at SAP licensing, paying more versus paying right. And I'm going to be taking you through this webinar today. Just some housekeeping. This webinar is recorded, so there is a recorded view of this if you have to drop out, and there are some slide decks available to this. If you need any information from us, please reach out to us. There are slides on the screen that will give you access to our web pages or to us for information purposes. And then please note that there is a questions tab in your menu bar. Please, if you do have any questions, pop them in the questions tab. We will get to them at the end of the session, and I'll try to answer those as quickly and as efficiently as possible. And yeah, if you've got any comments, it'd be great to hear back from you on the session. So let's get started right away. Right, so what are we going to cover in terms of today's agenda in this webinar? We're going to look at what drives the cost of SAP, some areas and elements of the SAP contractual structures, etc. Have a look at the Vocus Labs portfolio in terms of the company itself. What do we do? How do we engage with organizations? What is our SAMQ license optimization solution for SAP? How does it help you to optimize? And really the important part is maximize the investment that you've made in SAP, and to make sure that, as we said right at the beginning of this webinar, to make sure that you have the right size of licensing and not overpaying on your license investments. We'll look at the investment in terms of the quick assessment that we run for many organizations to help them get a feel for where they are in terms of their license optimization potential. We'll look at the process of that, and then we'll look at some elements of what you can add on to the quick license assessments, standard versus premium, and some other elements related to what we offer organizations. So where do we start? I think the most important element to understand from the I wouldn't say research, but the projects that we run with many customers, we come out with this kind of understanding of where customers are at. And it's important to note that customers can fall both above the median. So if this is the median over here, customers can fall both above and below. And the reason for that is because the licensing and the way in which customers are allocating their licensing sometimes is incorrect. And at the same time, they may be in a situation where they have a significant over-license position. And that's what we see here in terms of what we see from most of the projects and the assessments that we do with organizations. We find that they are, to a value of 60% of them, over-licensed, and that over-license percentage runs anywhere from very small amounts, 5 to 10%, all the way up to close to 75%, well over 60%. Okay, and so that occurs because over the years, many organizations who've had SAP for many years started out with an initial investment. Their business model has changed. They had many named user licenses and even certain engines and other elements of licensing. And because their business model has fundamentally changed, they've had restructuring, they've maybe potentially retrenched certain amounts of people. Now all of a sudden they're in a position where they have way too many user licenses, but they don't know that they actually have these because they're still allocating licenses and not actually looking at the usage of individuals and making that assessment more accurate. And in terms of that assessment and the project work that we do with many customers, you can see on the right-hand side here that the value to customers on average is we find about 2 million euros of shelfware per client. And that ranges. It can go from small amounts, but on average it's about 2 million, and the average then maintenance based on that 2 million, if you're working at a 22% maintenance base, comes out at about 400,000 euros on an annual basis. So that's a significant volume of money, and that would very much be better to be transferred back into a budget where you can either purchase additional product and or run some additional projects to streamline your business or adapt your business model, etc., to adapt to the business model. What we also find at the bottom half, and this, as I said, is important to note, is that you can be in both spheres at the same time, is that we find 30% of clients are also at audit risk. And that audit risk ranges from a very small amount, as you can see here, in some cases, a few percentages, all the way up to way over the 80%. Okay, and that's really because, again, what we see here is that the allocation and the understanding of the licensing in terms of allocation perspectives for named user licenses and even for engines, etc., and digital access, even the risk is very high in this space because the allocation is incorrect or because the digital access hasn't been measured correctly. Also because of the application layer that you have and maybe many third-party interfaces, it can result in a very high percentage of audit risk. And on average, when we do an assessment with customers, we find that on average, 1.5 million euros, customers are under licensed. So two things occur here. One, you're over licensed and you need to reduce that over license, and two, you're at risk. So it's not a great scenario for most organizations to be in. And that's why we work so hard to help customers reduce this and get into the situation where they're in the 10% area where they have control over their licenses, and really bring this here as close to that inflection point as possible. So we talked about what we see in the marketplace through our projects, and I think this slide is really fundamental in helping organizations look at their license structures and their contracts and all the facets that really form part of your license engagement with SAP. And I'm not sure out there if there are many companies that look at it from all of these different perspectives. And that's really important, because if you miss one of these, you can actually end up having a negative financial impact. And so it's important to understand what are the main items, and also then what can be measured using tools or solutions such as SAMQ and what we do with customers, and what can't be measured with them, and where do you need to use advisory type services, individuals and organizations such as ourselves to help you measure and manage the price variances, etc. So if we look at this, I'm going to go into that now, but really let me just talk through each of these elements. We have three main elements on the slide shown above here: the price components, the price influences, and the price variables. In terms of the price components, this is really what your license contract is made up of. It's made up of user licenses. These are named user licenses, and they can account for between 30 and 50% of your contract. From a digital access perspective, you need to measure indirect or digital access. There's two different models at the moment available. The indirect legacy model, looking at users and certain engines, the sales and service order engine, and the purchase order engine, and the new model, which is the digital document count. We've run a number of webinars on that. If you have any further detailed discussion you need on the digital access side, please reach out to us or have a look at our webinars in that space. And that can account between 50 and I've even seen higher, but normally 15% from a licensing perspective. And then you have your engines, so various different engines and the engine measurements, etc. And these can account for 20 to 70%. It depends on how many functional elements that you bought from an application perspective in your bill of materials. And then we have the database, and these are the four pillars that make up the fundamental price components of your contract. And the database varies as well. So you have runtime databases, you have HANA databases, you have other types of databases, whether it be Oracle databases, IBM, DB, etc. So many different types of databases, and the pricing metrics around those databases varies, Sybase, etc. And we have some information around the database elements as well. And that makes up between 8 to 25. And that's the price components. When we talk about price influences, we look at how you've deployed your SAP application. Have you deployed it on your own data center or servers or application database? In other words, your own infrastructure. If you have deployed it there, it's what you call on-premise. Are you using an external data center? Are you using SAP or hyperscaler for cloud? So what does your deployment look like? And this does have a significant influence on your price, because there are variations in terms of the contract that determine the licensing, the digital access, the engines, etc., and the database usage that is determined by the deployment structure that you have. And then you have the contract type, whether you've purchased a perpetual license or a subscription license with or without included infrastructure, whether you pay various different prices in terms of your maintenance costs, etc. The contract financials in terms of the discount levels. They're not always depending on the contract size. It really also depends on how effective and efficiently you negotiate with SAP and at what points you buy certain pieces of software and application from them. And then you have SAP-centric or best-of-breed environments in terms of digital access. We talked about the SAP landscape or the application landscape. This is very much an enterprise architecture discussion around your landscape and how this significantly can increase or decrease your digital access costs. So it's important to understand from a price influencing perspective, how does your landscape fit together? And what are the various different factors? If you take best of breed solutions, if you're adding on Coupa or Workday or other types of solutions and not using necessarily the SAP types of solutions, then that has a direct impact on your digital access. Price variables, of course, you need to look at the price variables in terms of discount levels, 0 to many different levels of price discounts. And how are these structured per your bill of materials? So very important, what would be the specific negotiation points that you would look to understand in order to negotiate the right discount for the right set of solutions and application and price components that you've actually purchased. Contract metrics, whether you have a UDD, a single metrics, a mixed and via product. So these are the items that you would find in the metrics of how you've priced your engines, your user licenses, etc., and your digital access and database. These are all the metrics specific to those products. And then you got the specific product metrics. These can be based on things like technical core, CPU, documents, business, revenue, spend, etc. These are more business type metrics that you have as an organization, and these certainly determine a price variable in the context of your contract. Now, when you want to try and measure or manage these in terms of your cost drivers, you can do it one of two ways. You normally measure the price components using a specific software asset management tool. In this case, we've got SAMQ, but these other ones, the process influences and the price variables, here you need to manage these by selection and negotiation. And this is, as I said, it has variables in it. Even your influence has variability in here. So it's important to understand and to be able to do accurate comparisons in each of these areas to determine what is the best fit for your organization. Okay, and each organization is pretty unique. So it's important to go through this in the specifics to your business model and how does it structure against what you're planning to do, also not only now, but also in the future. So build in future demand. There's many elements that need to come into creating what we almost call a total cost of ownership model for your SAP investments. Okay, so what is attainable? What can you do to make this license management and this process that we've just gone through in determining the SAP costs and understanding them, how can we make this simpler and easier for you? So the first thing that we put out there, and most organizations start with us in this position, is we do a very rapid license management, quick license assessment. So license management implementation process, it takes, from a duration perspective, more or less 4 weeks. It's a very quick process. And the outcomes of this are really to understand where you are having a license surplus and deficit. And the importance of this is then to start looking at saying, what can we use in terms of the surplus and what do you need to manage in terms of the deficit? If you have a license surplus, how can we avoid additional spending as your company is growing? I hope most companies are on a trajectory of growth. So how do you use that surplus to benefit your organization as you grow? How can you exchange out licenses and exchange things as your business model changes? So as you move into e-commerce, or as you've seen changes due to various factors that have been caused in the last 2 years by and still we're in it, the COVID pandemic, a lot of business model elements have changed. You have a very deep requirement for new products, new sets of functionality. How do you exchange the licenses that you have in terms of a surplus to get those new products? And then how do you manage and reduce the efforts of managing your license estate by as close to 90%? And that's really the principles of what we aim for in terms of helping you support your license management using a tool solution. And it's also very important that you get the right data to start negotiating with SAP on these facts and numbers. And that's really the principles of what we want to do, is put yourself as an organization in the right position to negotiate with all the relevant levers and the right set of data that you can go into the negotiation and get the best outcomes for yourselves from an organizational perspective. A little bit about Vocus Labs as a company. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but we've been doing this for a number of years. Started out in 2012 in Germany, and have had SAMQ running since 2014, so close on already almost 8 years next year. And together with that, we've got a global outlook based in a number of different organizations and companies here. And we also have another product called SetQ. And really, we combine the best-in-class SAP user management solutions plus very strong consulting expertise in license advisory to give you the best outcome for your SAP landscape. Two solutions sitting at the top here, SAMQ and SetQ, they are integrated. SAMQ really is what we're going to focus on in today's session around all this licensing and the management of your licensing and the different elements of this licensing. I'm going to jump into this in a lot more detail, but just so that you're also aware, we have a SetQ solution, which is really all around your access and authorizations. We've done a number of webinars this year. I've been involved in quite a number speaking about role optimization, role reduction, compliance, passwords, etc. And then combined with this and tying this all in is our advisory. So we help organizations not only get the best from the tool sets and make sure that they use those in the correct manner to maximize their investment in them, but at the same time, we help organizations get the best from the different complex areas of licensing as well as authorizations and compliance. So that's really an important element. We not only just, we're not only a one-stop shop in terms of solutions, but we also have advisory services that complement the solutions that we bring to market. Our clients range many across different industries with different business models, different requirements, different nuances in terms of their contract, different engines, different product variabilities, etc. And that really is what makes us unique. We see lots of different contracts, types, structures. We negotiate with very large organizations, and we also have very small organizations. We optimize about 35,000 plus systems every year, and we run over 100 projects with various different sizes of customers. So we have really deep insights into understanding what it takes to move you from the baseline level of just doing standard allocation of licenses and just standard measurements to being super optimally efficient in terms of managing your software asset management in your SAP environment. Okay, let me talk a little bit about SAMQ, our license optimization software. It's important to understand what is inside this package and how does it work in comparison to the allocations that you make in SAP and using S-Law, etc. We've got some additional slide decks that help you to understand what the difference is. So in here, SAMQ really is a centralized SAP license management solution with user license optimization. So you can see here that we focus on making sure that your users are using the solution, your SAP solution, in the most optimal manner, and therefore getting the right category of license is fundamental to what we do. It's really important to understand the difference, and I'm going to talk about this in a little bit more detail as I pull up the next slide. But really, what is inside the SAMQ solution? So first of all, it has this transactional database. I'll explain a bit more on that, about that. It has a lot of customizing and logic and for use rights. Very important because certain organizations have very specific use rights definitions for their users, for their named user types. They have specific categories of named users that are not, they are unique to their specific industry. It could be a banking user, it could be a retail user, etc. And therefore, we have to have customization specifically to manage those specific client requirements. On top of that, we have an SLA workbench. We have automated license management functionality that automatically goes and updates certain tables with the right correct license category, etc. Automatic user deactivation, very important. If you're not deactivating your users, they are still consuming a license on your inventory, and that can lead to risk for yourselves, or it can lead to a specific situation where you think you've run out of licenses and therefore you purchase more. Now on the bottom here, we have some other areas. I'm just going clockwise around this circle here. Digital access and indirect access. We measure that using the SAMQ solution. Engines, of course, we can do the engine measurements and alert. I've spoken about users. We can also give you the cost allocations based on your bill of materials and the cost allocated to each of the user license types, engine license types, digital access, etc. Importantly, we can do analysis and simulation. That's really, really helpful when you want to do simulation of alternative license types, as well as moving from an ECC system to an S/4HANA system. So if you want to understand what the change is that's going to take place when you move from ECC and the current named user license types that are on your bill of material and you're going to move to S/4HANA, it's better to simulate that because you're going to go through a contract negotiation, and therefore you need to have the right volume of license types in the right categories to make that work for yourselves. Of course, we have management dashboards that show you whether or not you are correctly licensed, etc. And these are very easy from a management perspective. SAMQ is a native add-on, quick to install, customizable. I've gone through most of those other elements in this description. So it's developed in ABAP. Yes, it's got a very easy to use GUI. We only install it in one point. That's really important. So you don't need to install this on every production or development system. We install it in one single point, normally on Solution Manager, or it could be in a QA system or in a sandbox, so long as it's on an ABAP system with certain parameters and prerequisites in terms of the version numbers. And that means we just use the SAMQ solution. We connect via RFCs to all of the different connected systems that you have. This makes it a very quick installation. So we use your existing RFCs or we build the new ones. It's up to yourselves to determine how you want to do this. It does this automatic user license classification based on usage. Let me just stop there for a second and just clarify this, because a lot of customers don't understand the difference between allocation and usage. Allocation is where you take your business processes and that which you see individuals performing in your organization based on their business process, and you say, okay, based on this, they should get allocated a professional or limited professional employee or ESS user category. Okay, now that is a lower level of granularity. Okay, when you come to it's just an allocation, you put that into SU01 in the table. The difference between that and what SAMQ does is it actually looks at what the individuals are actually performing in terms of the executed transactions that they execute on the SAP system. So it takes it to a much lower level of granularity. And that is really taking the high road from an accuracy perspective related to the classification of your users, which is based on usage. Okay, a very, very important fundamental principle. You are classifying the users based on their usage of the system, not on just their applied allocation. And so the USMM and the S-Law does that based on allocation. That's why there's a fundamental difference between what you're going to see as an output from SAP measurement versus SAMQ's measurements. Because the system actually goes and looks and it sees what people are actually doing in the system, and then it classifies them. Really important, and it does that automatically. So if you're running the full SAMQ solution, it actually writes back that classification into your SU01 table, saving you the effort of having to go and update every single individual in your system to the right license type. If you had to do this manually, you can imagine if you have 5,000 or 6,000 users and manually you have to go into every single one of the SU01 tables, it becomes very, very tedious and time consuming and a very high degree of effort. So and the other fundamental principle there is, as your business model changes, it's automatically re-updating your license classification. So very important there. Okay, of course, complete analysis of indirect usage and digital access. This is a very big high point at the moment for many organizations. Again, one of the differences in the SAMQ solution is the level of granularity that we go to determine the correct number of document counts, to determine whether or not these document counts are coming in from an external system or not. It's vital that you get these numbers correct, okay? If you're working in an organization where your landscape is very much made out of third-party systems with a very small SAP footprint, that significantly differs to an organization that has a very large SAP footprint with very few third-party interactions. There's a key differentiator in terms of the volume of documents created in this space, and we measure that very accurately. As I said, we have more than 130,000 pre-classified transaction codes with 50 license templates assigned to give you the correct license type. So there's a rule-based system that determines based on the transaction codes. What's also important about these transaction codes, and I'm sure you'll say, but wait, we have Z transactions and we have a whole lot of these other ABAP transactions that we've created as we've modified our SAP landscape or system. Yes, of course, we take those into consideration. So what we do is we go and we ask you to pull out your Z transaction codes. We start classifying these. We put them into the relevant template structure, and then it starts classifying the combination of Z transaction codes plus the standard SAP transaction codes to the right license classification. Reporting of engine consumption across all systems, we consolidate this. So especially where you've got multiple systems and they're using multiple engines or specific engines across those systems, we can consolidate that. A lot of customers come and say to us, we're struggling with our audit, and we can therefore automate this audit for you. The automation of the annual audit, it simplifies it, it makes it much quicker, and the outcomes that you get are enable you to run like a mock audit to make sure that everything is correct before you go into an SAP audit. Alternative license scenarios and simulations, I've spoken about that. This helps you to look at other license types, even simulate different, as I said, S4HANA, etc. We can do compliance alerts, especially in your engines. If you're going to run over a specific alert or engine volume, we can put a specification in that says you've reached 90% of your engine usage and customize a trigger for that via email. We can trigger the USMM automatically and do the comparison between SAMQ and SLAW. So that's what I said earlier, it's like a mock audit. Configure individual use rights, specifically for users that are unique in the organization. Simulate your license demand for S4HANA. And of course, importantly, look at inactivity detection and deactivation, making sure that you reduce all your inactive usage and bring those licenses back into the inventory through the deactivation portion. Okay, how do we go about this? So we have an 8-step process. It's very simple for most organizations, and it's a very quick and easy process that we go through. The first thing is get in touch with us, let us know and say to us, hey, we are interested in this. We're on the web, you can see us, send us an email. As I say, we have different individuals looking after different regions. You may speak to me if you're in the Africa, Middle East region. You may speak to one of my colleagues in APAC, in APJ, or in Europe, in North America, Latin America, etc. We have a YouTube channel if you want to find out more information, a whole lot of videos there. Have a look at what we do, etc. It's all available to you via different platforms. Okay, secondly, once you've got the quick license assessments and our assessment planned and ready to go and you agree to it, then it's a 4-week process from a duration perspective. We do the measurement, so we install the SAMQ solution at more or less 2 hours. We then start the measurement of the licenses. We do the inactivity of user reports. We do a simulation of alternative license types as well, to show you what other possibilities are available from a cost perspective. We look at the evaluation for improvements and optimization potential that you have. So we do a financial validation of the results to pull out and show you where you're at risk, in which license categories do you have challenges, where are you over licensed, where are you under licensed, and what are those values, and again, comparing this to the simulation, what can you do? And then we put this all together in a final presentation and we share that with you. Okay, once you've kicked off this here, you'll get an email from us. It's really easy. You go into our portal, you download the relevant SAP transport files for SAMQ, the relevant roles. There's only 2 of those roles, an installation manual, the project timeline, and we set up the next steps in terms of the technical validation sessions, okay, with you, a session with you. So once you have actually gone through the implementation, this is something that we don't need to do on your behalf. Your basis team can quite easily do this. You implement the SAMQ solution in dev, you move it through QA into production, into your sole man production if you're going to move it through that route. You apply the relevant roles, you get your auths team to put those roles in place, and that's all included in the manual. And then we set up the technical validation. We want to make sure that the systems that we need to connect to are connected correctly. We make sure that we can start pulling the first set of data and doing the customizing based on that, which is step 4. Well, pretty much step 2, we do the validation. As I said, it's a 2-hour session. We make sure that SAMQ is installed correctly, that all the systems that we have that need to be connected are connected correctly, that we can upload the last 3 months of data, and then we can run the first optimization runs. And we do this together with you. So it's normally over the shoulder. We do all of this work remotely, so there's no need for anybody to come on site, to have travel expenses or anything like that. It's a fully remote operated assessment, and it's very quick and easy to do. Then we start with the customizing. Okay, so we set up after the validation session a customizing session. We look at the overview of your user licenses. We say, what do you have in terms of your bill of materials? What are the use rights that you have in your contract specific to your organizations for these user licenses? And then we also do the identification specific customer transactions, your ZT codes, etc. And then we start doing a second round of license optimization, where we start doing the configuration with optimal license configuration. So we compare the actual, which is your USMM, versus your optimal, and then you can start to see the differentiation between what you've allocated versus what's actually taking place in your system from a usage perspective. We do a secondary customization. Again, we fine-tune this. So we also look at the alternative user license types, which you maybe haven't contracted. We do this because you can also take the outcome of this and apply this to further optimize your costs. Okay, it's important to understand there are 3 different other named user license options available: logistics, project, and worker. These are the definitions for each of those, and you can still be compliant but maintain a lower cost license. So instead of running everybody at a professional user license, there are alternatives for you to run cheaper license types. And then we do the final presentation. So what for you would be your optimization potential? And here we show you your license risks and deficits. Do you have surpluses? Which types of licenses should you purchase in the future? What volume of those licenses? How can you potentially go forward in terms of if you want to go into negotiation, exchanges, etc.? You get from us a management summary with recommendations. And you can see here at the bottom as an example of this optimization in here and how that would work. We also have a, that's our standard quick license assessment. We have a premium quick license assessment as well. And the difference between the premium and the standard, we build in some additional 2 areas where we look at the digital access document estimation report and a consolidated engine measurement report. So these are 2 reports that we pull from the system. We do not do any specific analyses or advisory consulting on these 2 reports, where we literally just produce the reports from you, and we show you in context, especially in the digital access, what is the total volume of your digital documents. And from account perspective, we don't go and determine which ones are now internal, which ones are external. That is a proper full digital access risk evaluation. And the engine measurement report, we just pull it out and we show you roughly the consolidation of your engines. What volume are you using per engine in terms of your metric? So this is pretty much, as I say, the principle that we've gone through in more detail: the SAP installation, technical validation, customization 1, customization 2, sometimes customization 3 with simulation of alternative user license types, and the presentation of the results. So overall, if you add this all up, it's 15 hours of elapsed time. So it's a very quick, easy process for you to run. This does not take you long. So if you really need to understand your license optimization potential, this is the quickest, easiest way to get there. I see that there are some questions. I'm going to get to them shortly. We're pretty much almost done. What do you get out of the system from a quick license to the standard quick license assessments? So we limit it to 3 system IDs, 3 digital access use case evaluations on the premium, and no user license classification. And really, you can see here, you look at in terms of the license assessment, you get actual user classification, users, inactive users, and the simulation of alternatives. This is our standard quick license. If we extend the quick license, it includes a digital access check and the engine report. And this really is there to help you build a business case around what do you require to put in place effective software asset management in your SAP environment. Remember, I went back right to the beginning of the slide around the cost elements and driving costs. To do this manually, you're just not going to get the right outcomes. We've seen customers, we've been involved with customers, they've tried it manually. You can't do it manually. You need a tool-based system to do this. So it's really important to look at that from that perspective. Okay, what is our labs service portfolio? You can see here, as I described, the quick license assessment. The standard one is at the bottom here. It gives you the relevant details. The premium one, it gives you some additional details in terms of the digital access and the engine reports. We have a managed service for organizations who are struggling in the context with their SAP management or the management of the SAP licenses. So we run this on a quarterly basis. We do compliance reporting. We do yearly audit preparation for them. We do their software updates and customization of the SAP solution, because we're making updates to SAP regularly throughout the year and improving it and adjusting it for new license types, the SAP RISE, all the stuff that's coming in the cloud, etc. So there are constant updates in this space, and we do have a managed service to help you with that. And then in terms of advisory, you'll see we have various advisory services in here, from creating an effective license position in ERP, and the items in that ERP include your digital access and introduction to that, the engine analysis, your user license optimization. We have a contract review if you just want to have a look at your contracts and understand what the value, the discounts, the terms and conditions. We can do a contract review. We can do audit defense. If you had a very unpleasant audit experience, we can help you sort that out. We can also help you negotiate with SAP, either in the foreground or in the background. In terms of negotiation support, this is like the strategy you should go ahead with. How will you manage the demand of new products, understanding the discounts, the recommendations for actions in that space. So helping a lot of organizations with the demand management side of procuring new SAP products. And then we have customized pricing for things like cloud product evaluations, licensing strategy, Arise with SAP evaluation, and your migration to S/4HANA. This is very much on the contractual elements, providing you with the total cost of ownership models for these different structures. So this is really the overall license advisory side. As I said, with most organizations, we start with one of these 2 assessments, and that's the easiest and most simple way to engage with us, and that's the way to go. Right, let me go into some questions. Let me open the question panel. Okay, we have a question here around how do we validate the transactions role mapping to a particular user license type, standard or special license type? Is it via contracts, user definitions? Absolutely. Let me clarify this for you. So in all SAP users and people who've purchased SAP, they have a contract, and those contracts have user definitions. Some of them are the standard boilerplate user definitions, but some customers have unique user definition rights. So what we do is we have in SAMQ all the standard validation classification on the user types. Okay, so we can classify them based on the standard. If you have a special license classification or user definition for a specific user type, we then add that in, and then we run the SAMQ license optimization solution against that, and it then pulls in the actual correct volume of users using that special license category. So let me give you an example. We work with a lot of retail customers, and they have retail users. Now, this is a special license category. They may even have specific Z transactions that fall into that retail user category. And therefore, we then go and customize it. We add in the Z transactions, we run the optimization, and it tells us how many users in your specific set of applications, especially if they're running it on a retail server, SAP Retail, ICE Retail, then we get to see how many retail elements they've got in there. I hope that answers your question. Please add more comments if it hasn't. It's not possible to, is it not possible to calculate the engine license usage using USM? Yes, it is. So you can calculate the engine license usage using USM. You can do that. That's the standard way of doing it. SAMQ does it automatically for you. It pulls it all together. And what's important about this is you can do this with USMM, but then you have to schedule a job in the background, and you've got to make sure that you don't overuse your engine usage. So in the context of what SAMQ does, it automatically can put in, you can put in tolerance levels so that you don't go over your engine usage and then end up in a risk environment. SAP has transparency on unit price of any of these metrics. They dig in their heels with any random unit price with no rationality ever. Okay, so this is about, you're really asking about things like the metrics, the unit price, and metrics. Absolutely. I think what's important to understand about this element here about how do we prevent SAP from digging in their heels. You have to have the right negotiation levers when you start engaging with SAP. Okay. It's really important to understand that there are alternative metrics available to you, and that you need to go into that negotiation engagement with SAP with those in mind. A lot of organizations don't know that there are potentially ways to change the metrics or adjust the metrics. So that's certainly something that we've seen in other contracts, and because we work with multiple different organizations, we see that there are alternatives, and we can certainly help you find those alternatives. And that's what's really important. We're not there to, we're there to maximize, as I said all along, maximize your investment in the SAP that you've made. And I think this is something specifically, maybe you want to share an example. We sit down and I can have a 30-minute discussion with your specific scenario in the case of unit metrics and unit price metrics. Maybe reach out to me specifically and we can share something on that side. Right, let me go to some other ones. Does the license of the solution require additional licenses for NetWeaver third-party validation? No, it doesn't. And even if it does, those are very cheap licenses, but we've never had a scenario where we've had to, customers had to purchase an additional third-party NetWeaver integration license on top of this. So again, if you are concerned about this, you can I mean, the licenses for the NetWeaver third-party integration are not hugely expensive, and we can certainly look at that. But so far, it's an SAP add-on, it's a product, and you can use it in that context. Can we send the USMM output reports directly to Solman and SLAW? We have a whole structure and way that we help organizations prepare for their audits. And technically, you have to run the SLAW report, which is the consolidation of USMM. It's not done the other way around. It's where you run SLAW, and SLAW then pulls the USMM reports and consolidates them together. So you don't do a push from USMM into SLAW. It's a pull from SLAW on USMM. It's a little bit different. So certainly we can help you with that. If you need, again, my suggestion is if you need specific technical information around the items of an audit preparation, etc., I can send you some documentation. Please reach out to me. Send an email to my email address on the bottom there, and I can certainly help you with that directly. Yes, the price charts. This is a challenging one. Yes, they don't publish the price charts. We have access to pricing, so please reach out to us if you're looking at wanting to understand the discounting and the levels of pricing. If you're going to buy certain SAP products, please reach out to us, and we can help you with that. In which industry is SAMQ particularly popular? I haven't found one specific industry. At the moment, I've been working across this year organizations that are in biotech, pharmaceutical, farming companies, companies that are manufacturing certain devices, companies that are dealing with heavy equipment, earth-moving machineries. I've been working across banking industries, retail industries. I've been working across companies that supply specific components in the world. So we are not limited to one specific, and we find across the group, everybody who is working with an SAP contract and environment has use for the solution. It's not that you need it for one specific industry. Typical size, we have companies that are from 300 users all the way up to companies that are way over 50,000 users. Some companies that we've dealt with I've seen a company or an organization, I won't say they were a company, but they were a government organization that had an engine license based on users close to 6.5 million users. This was a municipal organization, so definitely different size organizations. There's not one size organizations that we don't. Yeah, UDD, contracts on UDD. Oh, yes, let's talk about UDD. Principle of UDD, most companies go into a engagement with SAP. They're starting out their SAP journey, and they get a UDD contract, unlimited deployment from a licensing perspective, and they run this for 5 years. Okay, and at the end of the 5 years, they then need to go into a new contract with SAP. It can be 5 or 3 years, whatever that lifespan is that they sign. Then they need to true up their licenses. So that which they're using on the UDD is almost like it's unlimited. It's like having a smorgasbord of licensing. Now you get to a perspective where you now need to true up. Now, when you want to true up, it's not great to be able to true up on just an allocation or what you think is the right number. It's far better to right-size your licensing first, using a tool, using advisory services, and then move to the next contract level. So be aware that UDD has a place, but it is limited, and it has pain at the end of the contract when you want to transfer. So this is the challenge. You need to be able to manage that transfer out of a UDD contract. If you want specific advice around that, please again reach out to me. We can have a separate session around UDD and certain contract types, flex agreements, the different contract types, and we can discuss where you are, where the organization is, and what we're doing. I'm dealing with another 2 organizations currently that have UDD contracts. They're moving to a more, let's call it a right size and right sizing for pricing for a contract perspective. They'll move into a normal standard contract. They may move to a RISE with SAP contract out of UDD. So multiple different exit routes out of UDD. Can we share the 50-odd templates? No, we can't. That's IP that we won't be able to share. I appreciate the question, but unfortunately not. You know, use SAMQ. It's in there if you're running with a system and you need to manage your license types. That's what we've built. It's our IP, and it's really valuable to most customers. Okay, what all license metrics do you have in the tool? Could you please share the list? It's pretty much, I shared a few slides earlier. What's in the tool is got all the relevant elements to cover the three main licensing areas: the named user licenses, the digital access, and your engine measurements. So we're able to do that using the tool. Databases we don't put inside SAMQ because there's tools already that are standard that you can pull. We're not going to add a database functionality into SAMQ. It would be a duplication of already available tools. And the other thing is you can't really optimize the database. You've really just got to measure it and then take that measurement and determine whether or not it's accurate. It's more on the infrastructure side of things, and there are tools in standard SAP to do that, to measure your database usage. Yes, we can. The presentation is available. No, I disagree with your things here. It is no point to optimize quantity. No, there is a very big important point to optimize. First of all, if you don't optimize your license quantities based on usage, you will find that you will fall into one of those 2 categories. You'll either be over licensed by 60%, and you might find that you're under licensed by 30%, somewhere along that line. I know that it's important to understand the price points, okay? But if you don't optimize, I'm telling you now, you're either throwing money away, and the volume of money you're throwing away is determined upon the amount of licensing that you over license, and the amount of risk you're at is determined by how much inaccuracy you have in your housekeeping on your licenses. So I can assure you, I've told many customers that the majority of what I find doing quick license assessments is between 25 and 40% and 45% sometimes of license saving optimization potential. So if you want to, I can certainly walk you through a standard report that we do and show you exactly what it comes out at, but definitely there's enormous value to optimize. Right, let's go to the next one there. Again, as I said, if you want us to help you with pricing, please reach out to us. We can do no, we can. That depends on negotiation. Let's have, I think, rather reach out to me, please. Let's have a separate discussion surrounding on the pricing elements and how we go about negotiating. Okay, what is the difference between the license information tools available and SAMQ? So yes, SAP has got tools such as LUI and Looper and USMM and SLAW. But these do not at any point optimize your licensing. They only take the measurement on the allocation that you give it. Secondly, if you want to go and have a look, type into Google 5660, okay, 5660 licensing measurement, and go to the last page on that license measurement document. And there it clearly states that SAP, and it's an SAP document on the public domain, states that their licensing tools should not be used from an accuracy perspective to determine whether you as a customer are compliant in your licensing. They state it. Okay, so 2 things there. Again, I've got to, if you want, please reach out to me. I will share with you a differentiation deck between SAMQ and SLAW, what it does, what SLAW does, and the differences between that. I'll be happy to share that with you. Okay, Let's take this offline. You said totally negates the business case for investment in SAMQ, SetQ. I don't want to have a big discussion about this. If you want to look at the ROI, the return on investment for investing in SAMQ or SetQ, let's have a discussion around that. I can show you examples from customers where we've actually proved the ROI at 3 months, 6 months, 12 months. So there's certainly definitely a value for it. Good. I think some very good discussions. We're actually 5 minutes. If there aren't any more questions, as I said, please reach out to me. My email is there. Have a chat. We can have a separate session individually. And again, thank you very much for your time. I wish you a super rest of your day. If there are no other questions, let's close it off. And yeah, appreciate your attendance today. There may be another question. Let's see. Yes, we can have a demo. If you need, reach out to me. I can schedule a demo for you. We can walk through a demo 100%. If anybody needs a demo of the SAMQ solution or of SetQ, please reach out to me. I can demo both of these solutions to you. Yes, I think it's a good idea. Maybe early next year we'll have a demo, and let's take it from there. Great. Fantastic. Thank you again. Let's close out today's session. Again, my details at the bottom there. We have some very exciting webinars coming up. Just one last thing before I close out. We have a really exciting webinar coming up in the new year. Look out for it. We're going to be talking about SAP Rise. I know it's a hot topic. I know organizations want to understand. We have templates that can measure the Rise functionality. We may be demoing this next year, early next year in January. Have a look out for us, join us, and we look forward to seeing you in that session. Okay, fantastic, everyone. Have a great rest of your day. Stay safe and look forward to seeing you in our next webinar.